So you actually, during college years, you went to China, stayed with my parents.
I did.
Okay. And then you become a union organizer once you came back to the U.S.
After I finished college, yeah.
after finish. So you didn't drop out of college.
I thought about it, but I didn't.
What was the subject you were studying?
After China or before?
Well, okay. Before and after.
Before, I had about 6 different majors.
I
I think I landed on political science, but I can't remember. I started out as a business major. Oh, that was a business. I went to China, transferred schools, went to school where I could make up my own major. So I made up a major called Women and Class, the Processes of Social Change.
Which school was that?
That was Brown University.
Before you were in the Midwest somewhere.
It was Miami of Ohio. I did.
Brown is very flexible in that way.
It's a very fancy school. You get into fancy schools, let you do whatever you want.
You can afford to do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Okay. So what made you become a union organizer?
Part of it was the time with your parents. And then when I got...
Wait a minute, how that has any impact?
Such a long story.
Okay, so when I went to your parents originally in the fall of 1987, it was just for a week, but I really hit it off with them. So I kept coming back. They kind of couldn't get rid of me. And then eventually they agreed that I could come back in the spring and live there for a couple months. So I basically was a failure in the dairy, but they decided I was good enough to give me a shovel and I could dig irrigation trenches. That was my great contribution to the farm. So I would do manual labor during the day, and then I would come back, and most nights I would come back. I brought milk with me from the dairy, and I would just sit and bother your parents and be like, why can't we have freedom of press in a socialist country? And why can't this? And what about this? And is it true that you met Mao? And blah, 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 and, question after question. And they would, I think when they got tired of me asking questions, they would give me a book to read. And they would say I wasn't allowed to ask any more questions until I finished the book. So I read a lot of books. And
like what kind of books were they? Do you remember?
I read Anna Louise Strong, I Change Worlds.
Right.
I definitely read Red Star Over China. I can't remember if I read it before or after or both. I think they gave me some of Bill Hinton's books to read.
Right.
Fan Shen.
Right.
I think I read it there for the first time. Those are some of them. I think they probably gave me more. Not they didn't sit me down with Das Kapital.
Right.
It was, more sort of learn people's stories.
Right.
Probably because I wouldn't have read Das Kapital. And then, so when I left China, I had some clarity that I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I was clear that I wanted to serve the people. I was clear that there was sort of a choice of, do you spend your life in the service of a few, or do you spend your life in the service of many? And I decided I was going to spend my life in the service of many, but I didn't know how. So I came back. I transferred universities. And I do not come from a union family. I come from Midwestern farming stock. So there was a fight on campus with the food service workers and the maintenance crew and the library workers. And the university wanted to make them start paying for their health care for the first time. And at the time, Brown cost $20,000 a year, which was a ridiculously crazy amount of money, and now seems like nothing. And the workers' average salary was $20,000 a year. And so I just thought, well, this is ridiculous. If we can pay $20,000 a year and they're living on $20,000 a year, they shouldn't have to pay for their medical. So I came to one of the first groups of students who were meeting to figure out how could they help the university's unionized workers keep their medical free. So I did that. I also did a lot of protests around women's safety and women's rights on campus. I met someone recently who's the sort of darling child of their family who's passed away at a young age, had gone to Brown and around the same time. And I was like, well, what was he doing? She's like, oh, he was president of his fraternity. I was like, I was probably protesting outside of his house. That's probably the closest we got to meeting. So, this was the late 80s. So there were lots of campus speak outs, lots of protests around sexual assault on campus. So I did a lot of that. And then
Campus assault to the staff, to the workers, or to the students?
Students. We were very focused on women being assaulted while they were university students.
Okay.
Usually in frat houses, which is why I'm pretty sure I was demonstrating in front of the frat house where my shop stewards.
The male students' sexual harassment on the female students.
Yes, that was, and sometimes it was about and it definitely bled over to, or included the sort of high instance of sexual assault that girls and boys, but more girls than boys, experience in their lifetimes.
So in that struggle, what was your demand? What do you do concretely besides demonstrating?
Well, this is why I went to work for the union and not for the women's movement.
Well, explain that.
It was hard to figure out what the concrete demands were. So we would demand things like free self-defense classes, which is good.
Right.
We would demand sort of free security shuttles at night. Mm-hmm. If you were going from the library to the dorm late at night, that you could call and get a free shuttle. I think we got little, this is before, this is 1987, 88, 89, 90. Right. So before the era of cell phones, so we got these little blue, phones. Like there would be a phone with a blue light, so you knew if you were in trouble, there was a place to call somebody. But there was very little concretely that, besides educational events and sexual assault awareness weeks, and didn't seem like much else.
Targeted female students or male students for educational?
The educational events were supposed to be for the entire community to try and raise awareness about sexual assault and sort of what the societal structures are that cause that it's a power thing, not a sex, like just sort of general education for everybody. But I think we were probably, in retrospect, my guess is we were largely talking to ourselves. It's my guess about what we were doing.
Right.
So after doing that, and I continued volunteering for the union, they settled their contract. Then they tried to organize the clerical workers on campus. So I was a student clerical worker. I volunteered for the union, and I also tried to volunteer. I had no idea what I was doing. In my little building, there were, I think, me plus 3 grown-up clerical workers. I think I got 2 of the 3 of them to join the committee. I don't know what a committee was, but I got them coming to meetings. And then mysteriously, the director of the Center for Public Service, where I was a clerical worker, sat me down and said, with the sort of whatever student person director was, and said, "We just think that your talents are being underutilized. We really think you should do this other job that pays more and that's a little bit more glamorous." And I was like, look how well they think of me. They finally realized how talented I am. And I was like, okay. So I did some other job, which I ended up not liking. Then I ended up quitting, which was exactly what they wanted me to do. But I was too young to understand what was happening. But so I did that volunteering for the rest of college. And sort of the best I could figure out at the end was that if I wanted to both combine the work that I'd done around women's rights and women's safety and women's just sort of agency, and any work around class, that the place to go was the union. And that probably the best place to go was a union that was organizing a bunch of female workers in the service sector, because the jobs were lower paid and more women and less respect. And so that's why I went to work for the union.
The union, which one?
It was then called Hotel Employees and Restaurant Employees.
Right.
And it was a local of the union in Providence.
Right.
Well, my theory was if women made more money, then they would control the house and they could control their lives. And if there was an asshole in their life, they could say, hit the road, buddy, because I got my own money and I'm fine.
Right, I don't need you.
And it took, this is 34 years with the union. It took about 30 years, but maybe 28 years, about 28, 29 years in, I was having a meeting with a banquet server from Cape Verde. And she was telling me her life story and telling me about how her dad sent her to the US because she had a boyfriend that her dad didn't like, but that didn't work out because the boyfriend followed her. It turned out her dad was right. He was kind of a dud, but she had a kid. Anyway, she leaves that guy because he's a dud. Then she gets romanced by her first white man. And it was great. And then she's like, and then we got married. And then he basically locked me in the apartment. And so it was a very abusive relationship. And I said, well, what gave you the strength to leave? How did you finally get out? And she said, when I worked my first banquet job and got the paycheck. I was like, oh, it worked. It worked. It took me 30 years, but my theory was proved right.
This is the case recently you find, or just?
Yeah, it's a woman here in Boston who
Right,
I've gotten to know.
Right,
And I was just asking her life story.
Right.
And she'd been working banquets for 15 or 20 years at that point.
Right.
But it was the getting a decent job with a decent paycheck that she was like,
Give her economic freedom.
I don't need you. Bye-bye.
Right. So women's liberation has to be based on economic independence. Is that what you're saying?
Well, as you know, I'm not very good at theory. But yes, that was my theory.
Okay.
And I found one instance where it was proven correct.
The mistakes you learned, the success you got, your best moments, your worst moments. There's so many things to talk about. Like how do you, being an organizer, what does that mean? What do you do every day? Start from early days.
Oh my God. When I first started, I had a mix of organizing workers who weren't in the union yet and representing workers who had the union. For the workers who had the union already, I had to learn how to keep an internal organization going. So it wasn't dial a phone number, get your customer service rep. It was a group of women on the shop floor because this is a school lunch program. How did they have regular meetings, talk about what their issues were, identify what the priority issues were to get solved, make a plan for solving them, execute the plan, come back, meet, wash, rinse, repeat, do it all over again. And so sort of how to have a functioning union on the job that has, so that there's some, so that to me the test is always when you walk into a workplace, who does it feel like controls the shop floor? And in the non-union places, it mostly feels like the boss is in complete control. So your choice is to suck up the boss or be a good enough worker that you feel like you can speak up a little bit, but not too much. In a union workplace, you can have a union workplace where it feels exactly the same, but the wages and benefits are better, but where it still feels like the boss controls everything. Or you can have a union workplace where it feels like there's a contest for who's in control of the shop floor. And so that workers have a real sense of, well, my boss came in and told me I should scrub the toilet with a toothbrush. And I said to my boss, let me think about that. Yeah, no, that's not in my contract. I'm not going to do that. And so, in the places, so that's sort of the internal work. And where you really build a good structure, you watch the really strong leaders. They watch the new boss come in and they sort of measure them up. And they're like, yeah, that one's an asshole. They're not going to last. And so there's this sense of,
How do you make that last? Make the job difficult.
The bosses need the workers if the thing's going to work. And so if the boss is an asshole and you have an organized workplace, it's pretty easy to gum it up. It's lots of ways for things to be more difficult. And then if it's a good boss, they're like, okay, this one's a pretty good one. They're also not going to last because the good ones the boss gets rid of, and the bad ones we get rid of.
The nice boss, they don't last. The terrible boss don't last.
No.
Only the mediocre ones.
No, the mediocre ones also don't last. None of the bosses last. They all come, they all go. Nobody lasts.
Now who lasts?
No, the workers. If you have a union, the workers do.
But there's still the organization is run by the management.
Sure, the organization that is interested in making profit,
Right.
yes, that's run by the management, but it's, so we represent hotel workers, food service workers, and casino workers. Right now, my entire focus for this year is on hotels, so I'll focus on hotels. So the people who make the decisions about how the hotel is going to run, they're not working in the hotel. They're like in Chicago or New York or LA
Corporate
or
executives, yeah.
Mexico City, or like they're not here.
Right.
And so all the people we deal with, they're like cogs in the machine. They're
Right.
like, they get worn out, the boss throws them out and puts another one in. But when you have a union, it sort of stops. The worst job in a union place, honest to God, is frontline supervisor. It's a shitty job in a union place, in a good union. Because the worker structure is like, nope, that shit's not coming to us. That seems like your shit, not our shit. Good luck with that. And then the bosses are like, here's the shit. Pass it down. And the frontline supervisor is like, but they won't let me pass it down. Not our problem. And so I think that really,
worst job.
in a union job, I really think the union shop, the worst place is a frontline supervisor.
Right.
If the union's real. If the union's on paper but not real. So half my job was representing workers who have a union. Half my job was organizing workers in the union. And I was initially pretty terrible at it. In my first drive, we had an agreement. The employer, we had some political pressure that had them sort of hemmed in. So they agreed not to fight us, but we just didn't know. We just sort of walked around asking people to meet with us and sign a card. It wasn't very good organizing.
How do you do the first one? Was success or failure, or what happened?
It was both. We got a majority of people to say they wanted the union. And then said, okay, we want recognition. And between when we asked for recognition and when it's called an arbitrator, when the person was supposed to count the cards to see it was a majority, a bunch of well-paid European white male restaurant servers whose economic situation was quite different than most of the workers in the hotel. They were highly paid, tipped workers. Put on their suits and came in and let the back of the house non-English speaking workers believe that they were management and told them they all should have signed to take their cards back. And because I hadn't built a structure and it wasn't their union, it was my union, the workers were like, well, this woman said I should sign it. This guy, who seems like he can fire me, said I should unsign. So I'm going to unsign. And so we lost our majority. We ended up in court, and 3 years later, the courts decided that we were right, that we'd won. And that I just happened to have moved back to Hartford. I had been living someplace else. And I walked in and we got this award from the courts. And I was like, oh, we have a union. Oh, nobody knows we have a union. This is going to be fun. So they went in. I did a better job this time. I organized a committee of leaders. people, one person take responsibility for banquets, 2 or 3 people take responsibility for housekeeping, with somebody take responsibility for the bellman and so each department had a group. And the boss ran between an A and a B campaign against us. It was
Wait, A and B.
like if a letter grade. If if you go to school you get an A, you go to school you get a B. It was
Right.
so it was a pretty good. It wasn't really a joke. They were really trying to fight us.
Right.
The first bargaining session, we only have a year under U.S. law. This is approximate, but from when you get recognition to when the boss can run a campaign to vote the union out, you get a year. Except for when you don't, but that's stupid legal stuff. At that point, I had a year, so I had to start moving. Except for if you have a contract, and if you have a contract, you're protected from the boss getting rid of the union. So I had to figure out how to get a contract, but I hadn't built the organization yet. So the first bargaining session was me, 2 of the women who worked with me. One worker had the guts to come in and sat right by the door, waiting to see if anybody else is going to show up. The company comes in, they bring the manager, they bring a top-tier anti-union lawyer, and they had 15 managers and supervisors in the room. And it was me, Dana, and Connie, and the one worker by the door. The one worker waited about 20 minutes, realized nobody else was coming, and out the door. And so it was me, Connie. I just wanted to throw up. I was just like, oh, this is really bad. This is really bad. So
What do you do?
I kept organizing people, and I kept putting
But that meeting,
I presented our proposals, and the company attorney pretty much cleaned my clock, wiped the floor with me. If it was a boxing match, I was a knockout. It was not good. It was so bad.
It's a total defeat.
Yes, luckily it was a war, not a battle that we were in. But if it was judged by one battle, we were done.
Right.
It was not a good day.
Right.
And so over the course of the year, I kept meeting with people, privately outside of work or in work, and just putting the choice in front of them.
And how do you meet people? How do you find people? How do you know them?
Well, because we had won the union through the courts, I had the employer had to give me a list. I had with home addresses.
Oh, okay.
So I'd go visit people at home if they wouldn't talk to me at work. If they would talk to me at work, I'd talk to them at work to set up a meeting outside
You
of
can
work.
go to the hotel and meet people.
Because I had because we'd won.
Right.
So I had the right to be inside the hotel. Limited. I couldn't go walk all the way around, but I'd go to the cafeteria and go to locker rooms.
And how do you know who to talk to? Whoever wants to talk to you?
That's definitely how I started. Because who else am I going to talk to but the people who would talk to me?
Right.
And then you can sit in the cafeteria and you can look around and you can say, oh, look, that set of 4 Puerto Rican women, they sit with each other every day. Oh, this set of 3 Somali women, they sit at the same table every day. Oh, these Polish women, they sit in the same, right? And so you can sort of watch, you can observe, you can figure out the groups.
Right.
And then if you can just figure out who from each group is... you really need 3 things to be a leader.
Mm-hmm.
You need to have a backbone.
Yeah.
You have to be well liked by your coworkers,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to be a good worker.
Wow. So that's tough.
Yes. So you find the person who's got the best of those 3, and you recruit them.
Good worker.
Yes.
Respected. And what else?
You have to have a backbone, meaning you have to be willing to stand up to the boss.
How do you know that?
Oh, people stand up to the boss all the time.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
They're,
in all different ways.
yeah, union, not union.
Right,
People
right.
are always standing.
Yeah,
People are always.
Some people always very shy, doesn't want to say anything.
That's right. But there's always
there's
always a day when the boss comes to the lineup in housekeeping and says, today you have to clean 18 rooms instead of 15. There's always the person who's like, that doesn't seem right.
Right.
Right? Like there's people are always finding, not all people, but in any workplace, there's always somebody trying to say, I don't think it should be the way you say.
Mm-hmm.
And so the trick is to find somebody who's got enough backbone that they do that, but they can't just be a complainer.
Right.
Complainers aren't liked by their coworkers. Complainers are the people who everybody's like, oh my God, she's at it again. Ugh.
Okay.
And they have to be a good worker because when they start to push, the boss is going to push back. And if they're a bad worker, the boss knows where to push.
Right.
So you can't get to work on time. You can have a backbone, be well liked, but you can't get to work on time. The boss is going to say, well, you're fired.
Right.
You keep coming in late, you're done.
Right. So you got to have no excuse for the boss.
You got to be able to cover your ass.
Right. So you find this among each ethnic group?
Sometimes it's each ethnic group, and in Hartford we had multiple. It's very multiple.
Right.
In Hawaii, when I worked for the union in Hawaii, about 60% of the workforce and 90% of housekeeping was Filipino.
Mm-hmm.
And of the Filipinos, 90% of the Filipinos were Ilocano. So it wasn't like, so if you have a Hilton Hawaiian Village with 500 housekeepers, you can, and there's 450 of them are Ilocano, you can't have one. Right? So, but if you go in a place like Boston or Providence or Hartford or Providence not so much, Hartford and Boston, where the workplace, one hotel in Boston housekeeping that was about 50 people I counted, I think 6 different first languages, maybe 7. That's just how Boston is. It's not true everywhere, but that's how Boston is.
Very much.
Lots of refugees come to Boston. It's a very diverse immigrant population.
Right.
Providence is, hi, meet the next Dominican person. Like basically everybody's Latino and most of them are Dominican in the back of the house positions. Right. So I found people and I would meet with them and I would basically say, look, you have this gift, like this thing fell down from the skies. The courts said you get to have a union if you want one. Now you got to decide, do you want one? Because like I can't give it to you. Like, you
Right. Right.
I tried giving it to you. I got my clock cleaned.
Right.
So, but you've got this chance. And from 1990 to when we tried to organize it first to 93, or I can't remember if it was 93 or 95, somewhere in there when we won the decision. The boss because the boss thought the union was gone, so a lot of the conditions that they had opened with had become worse. And so I could sit with people and say, when I talked to you 3 years ago,
Right.
you said you didn't need the union, or that you didn't need to fight for the union because this was good and that was good. But now you have less vacation, or your raise was 12 cents last year, or they took this thing away. Like the medical got a lot worse. Like now you know now what happens if you do nothing.
Right.
So what do you want to do? So over the course of the year, I built a committee that represented the majority of the hotel. And we figured out, as we had initially, because this was a complicated ownership that the state treasurer of Connecticut had invested some money. So they had we had some political pull. So we were able to sort of, working with allies and community, create political pressure that forced the owner to want to get a settlement, and then got the workers strong enough that when the management company ran their A or B level campaign, eventually the workers felt strong enough to tell them to go shove it, and then we won.
Then what do you do next?
Dude, we're in like 1993. I gave you an hour and a half. You're gonna have to pick and choose.
So you spent most time in Hawaii.
So I spent 12 years in Rhode Island and Connecticut. 3 in Rhode Island, 9 in Connecticut, but it was the same local.
Right.
So different cities, same local. And then I moved to Hawaii in 2002, and I stayed there till 2015.
The Hawaii seems to be a very good experience, and you built a very strong local there, right?
Well, I mean, I got married and had a kid. Isn't that every woman's dream? That's what you mean, right?
No. But I remember you were going to a campaign, organized casinos in Connecticut.
Yeah.
And that was not successful.
Was not successful.
Wow. Can you tell us about why? What happened there?
Well, it's not quite right to say it wasn't successful. It wasn't successful until after I left. So maybe I was no. So we were trying to figure out the conditions on the. So that you sort of need three things to organize a union. You need issues, leaders, and expectations. So issues means there's got to be things people are upset about.
Right.
There were plenty of issues for the Foxwoods workers. Leaders, we could find leaders. The expectation that we could win was our problem, because people were working on sovereign land, because it was a Native American reservation. Workers' comp didn't apply. Any state law you can think of didn't apply, and none of the federal civil laws. You couldn't kill someone because some of the federal criminal laws apply. But you could have someone get hurt at work and just the boss could just be like, bye. No, you're not getting anything. Sorry, you're done. So we had issues and we had leaders, but we couldn't figure out a way within the structure of tribal sovereignty to win to give workers the expectation of actually reaching an agreement with the employer, which was a sovereign state. And then shortly after we shut down the campaign, and I'd moved to Hawaii, we won a lawsuit in California on a different Native American reservation, where the courts said that if there was a tribal business on a reservation that was engaged in conduct that was not solely for people of the reservation, but was interstate commerce, basically, was engaged in regular sort of, it wasn't just tribal, and that all federal laws would apply.
Right.
And so when that happened, I was already in Hawaii, but a group of dealers sort of self-organized. Well, They went to the UAW, and very talented organizing director at the UAW worked with them. But they were hot. You have shops that are hot. It was a hot shop. And an attorney who I'd worked with for years when I was working on the campaign was like, oh, here's how we do it. We go to the tribe and we say, we're going to file for an election with the federal government. You're going to object because you're going to say you're sovereign. But here's this lawsuit from California that says you're going to lose.
Right.
So you could you could risk losing your sovereignty, or you could work out an agreement with us. And at that point, the tribe said, well, let's work out an agreement. And so the dealers got the union first, then the cocktail servers.
Oh, eventually they took it.
Yeah, not with us.
Right.
And then eventually the janitorial workers are called EVS, Environmental Services, I think.
You plant the seed, they harvest it, but still a union.
Yeah. So and EVS became part of our union, not the local I came out of. But so it's, in large part it's organized today. But if we'd stuck around another 6 months, we would have been like, oh, this is how we win.
Right.
But we couldn't.
Yeah, but you don't know how long it will take.
Yeah, and we'd given 5 years already, and the 9/11 had happened, and our budget, and we'd lost so many members, and so we had to pick and choose.
Right.
And we pulled up stakes and walked away.
When you go to a new place, first year is really hard because you might not have a good local union leadership that supports your work.
That can happen. That was not what was going on in Hawaii. Hawaii was hard for different reasons. Vancouver was complicated, and Boston was complicated.
If you want to be a union organizer, but sometimes the local leadership are very much satisfied with what's status quo.
Yeah.
And so when you trying to do union organizer, they don't give you much support.
Right.
And so what do you do about that
Well,
situation?
but I think for me, so I come out of what was a training local. So I went to Hawaii, Vancouver, and Boston. If any one of those leaders was satisfied with their situation, I would never have been invited in. So in all three cases, there were reasons why they wanted to add additional firepower.
I see.
And so the Hawaii situation, the local had been founded in the 40s. It had been run by one family, Rutledge, the father and the son, from the 40s until 2000, until the year 2000, with the exception of 2 3-year terms, with 6 years in the 80s, when somebody else won, and the Rutledges. Well, I don't have evidence, but let's just say he ended up in the hospital more than once, having gotten the shit beat out of him, and other dirty tricks were played. And after 6 years, it went back to the Rutledge family. So when I showed up, there had been a 5-year civil war between the second Rutledge. The third Rutledge was on staff, but between the second Rutledge and a leader of the union who had left college in the 70s to go SALT, to go radicalize, to try and change what he saw as a business union into a more progressive militant organization. So it took him, he succeeded. He became the head of the local. He didn't know it was going to take him 25 years. And so he very much wanted help and was very supportive of the idea of how, of building a strong committee and a militant organizing union. But we had huge internal factionalization because the first election, about 5,000 people had voted, and he won by about 80 votes, but he screwed up his nominations. So if you want to do this, make sure you read the rules and do it right. So he'd screwed up his nominations, and so he didn't have majority leadership on the executive board. And the way unions are set up here, the leader doesn't have absolute power. They have to get permission to spend money from the executive board. He couldn't get it because he didn't have majority. So he got trusteed from the International Union.
Trustee means he got removed.
The International came in and said, you're violating the bylaws of the local. We're removing you from office. They didn't get fired, but he got removed from his office. He was allowed to stay and work at the local, and then they reran. They sort of sorted out a short-term contract. They reran the election. The International really thought that the Rutledges were going to win. They did not. Instead, the guy who won, Eric Gill, he won a second time, and this time he didn't screw up his nomination papers. but it was 5,000 people voted, and he won by 21 votes.
Wow,
So
close.
it was not a landslide.
Right.
There was no mandate.
Right.
And so I got there, and the what was so difficult was Eric had all ideas that I very much agreed with, and he very much agreed with my ideas, but he did not know how to implement any of those. He was not a great he was a visionary. He brought a lot to that union, but like figuring out a nuts and bolts plan that gets you from there, like he knew where he wanted to get to. He didn't know how to get there. And we were the opposition, which lost by 21 votes. Now, it's a 10,000 person union.
Right.
So just in the United States, to have 5,000, half your members vote in your election
Right.
is extraordinary.
Right.
Most people aren't paying that much attention.
Right.
So a lot of people were paying a lot of attention, and half of them didn't want him.
Right.
And the opposition was very well funded because of how the union had been set up. Their resources had been diverted to an organization called Unity House. That even though the Rutledges had lost office, they still controlled Unity House. And Unity House had like $80 million or something. It had a lot of money.
Unity House?
It was set up when the Rutledge controlled the Teamsters and Local 5 as a holding company to own the real estate where the union offices were, and in theory to do good things, to give scholarships, to run bowling leagues, to run softball leagues, to do things that would be good for members.
Funded by what? By
It was
union dues?
initially it was funded by voluntary contributions by members.
Okay. Yeah, so they well funded this and
Well funded. So anybody who still wanted to support Rutledge could quit their job at the union, walk over to Unity House, get a raise, and be paid to full-time do nothing but try to undermine the program that I was trying to put together with Eric Gill. So yeah, there was a lot of factionalism. Yeah.
yeah, and it's almost like a mafia type.
The Justice Department had raided the union's offices a couple years before Gill won and seized all their property. So there were some allegations of corruption, yeah.
How do you overcome that obstacle?
You read Bill Hinton's book, and you understand that what you need is to build the committee.
Well, I mean, anyway.
I'm kind of joking, but
Yeah,
not really.
yeah.
Like if you look at sort of how Bill described, I don't know if he got it right or wrong, but how he described the process of change, it's not that different. So we
like the in the book Fan Shen, you mean?
yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
similar to the very first organizing drive. You identify leaders of groups, you bring the leaders together, you put a choice in front of people. What do you want? You want to fight? You want, like, the question of do you want to fight or not fight is always a stupid question.
Right.
But like, what do you want?
Right.
And then the question is, okay, how are you going to get that?
Right.
And usually if you're dealing with employers in capitalist America, the only way you get is fight for it.
Right.
And so then you just, and then if people say, yeah, I want to fight, then it's like, okay, you're going to have to do hard things. You're going to have to, they're not hard at first. Get people to sign a petition. That's not that hard.
Right.
Get people to wear a button. That's not that hard. Get people to come to a rally. It's a little bit harder because you have to come after work. You have to make arrangements for your life to work without you going home.
Right.
Okay, you got to get ready to go on strike. That's probably the hardest thing we ask people to do. So we ran a campaign from when I got there in February until I think we settled in September. So about a 7-month campaign where we really kind of started with nothing, or well, not nothing, because again, half the membership had voted. It was a very engaged membership, but we had to sort of build a structure that could focus us on fighting for a better contract with the employers, because if you're a hotel company in Hawaii, you have the politicians with you because it's a post-colonial situation, and they're all like, oh, we need the hotels, so we have to be nice to them.
Right.
And they'd watched a 5-year civil war play out in the union, and it wasn't like they weren't paying attention.
They love it.
And they were like, oh, this is great. They're weak.
Right.
And they're divided.
Right.
Let's go crush them. And it was right after 9/11, which hit Hawaii very hard because it was the airplanes that took down the World Trade Center were long-haul airplanes. They were going from Boston straight shot to San Francisco because they need a lot of fuel.
Right.
So Boston wasn't hit that hard, even though this is where the planes came from, because you can do a lot of short trips and get here.
Right.
But Hawaii, you had to be prepared to get on a plane that had a lot of jet fuel.
Right.
If you're going to Hawaii. So Hawaii was really affected by 9/11. So the occupancy was down, The union had been fighting with each other for years, and the employers were like, let's go. We're going to break them.
So what did they do to?
They colluded with the former leader, and they just said no. We would say we want protection from subcontracting. No. We want protection from when you sell the hotel. No.
So basically, when you negotiate a new contract, they say no for everything that you want.
Yeah, because they didn't feel any need to say yes, because
you're weak.
Because we're weak.
And what were the challenges that you faced? That language barrier or ethnicity? There's not much.
In Hawaii, not language barrier, because most everybody there speaks English, whether you're from the Philippines, where the U.S. has had such a large presence for 100-something years, or you're from Micronesia, where the U.S. has had such a large presence, right? So like the sort of these remnants of imperialism. So language was not the issue. Immigrant versus non-immigrant was a big divide. So my husband was local, which meant he was Chinese. Local can be anybody born there who's not white. Technically, you can be local if you're white, but I've never heard somebody white who's born there not be referred to as local haole. So there's an extra word added. And locals and immigrants generally had, it's not the same dividing line as you would find between black workers and white workers here, but it's pretty fraught. It's pretty tense. And
but the workforce tends to be mostly immigrants or mostly local.
In Hawaii, it's a mix. Housekeeping is almost entirely immigrant, but the front of the house is much less immigrant, much more, because if you're going to be in a guest-facing position, so it's a lot of locals in the front of the house, a lot of immigrants in the back of the house, which already is easy to divide those two groups because it's different income, different nature of work, all sorts of
the
things.
local gets higher paid than the immigrants.
Generally higher paid, and the jobs aren't,
not as bad.
I mean, look, cleaning hotel rooms is
not work.
No pun intended, it's kind of shitty. Like you're cleaning people's toilets. And people have no respect for how they leave their room when they're traveling. And so it's, not everybody, but it can be very hard work.
So how do you overcome this division?
By building committees, because I read Bill. No.
But see, you build committee among each group. But how do you make two groups work together?
So an example is Hilton Hawaiian Village, which at the time was 1,500 workers. I think it's 1,800 now. Was a real battleground. It had been a Rutledge shop. Meaning a majority of people supported Rutledge, not Gill. And so a couple of the Rutledge staff people ultimately chose the program that we were running as opposed to the program that Rutledge was running. They thought it was better for the workers.
What kind of program are you talking about?
A program to fight the boss.
Okay.
The way we won, we were like, you're a Rutledge supporter, that's great. I'm sure Rutledge did a lot of good things. You're a Gill supporter, that's great. We believe we'll do a lot of good things. This isn't about either of them. This is about the employer. How the employer, we need protection from subcontracting. We need protections from successorship. We need a raise. That's not a thing we get from Gill or Rutledge. That's the thing we get from the boss. So let's talk about what we're going to do to push the boss. And so and that was a program that could unite a majority of workers. And so as workers got more and more united, the Rutledge team got more desperate, because if this program, even though we said it wasn't about Gill or about Rutledge, if you run a program under Gill's leadership that wins a good contract that people feel proud of, then when Gill runs for election, they vote for Gill. And Rutledge understood that. And so he got more desperate, which led him to do things like tell people to vote no on the strike. Like he ran an article in the newspaper saying if he'd been running the union, there wouldn't be a strike, because he knew how to handle the boss and Gill didn't. So he did everything he could do, including telling people who were very loyal to him, vote no and get your coworkers to vote no, even though that was directly against the workers' interest, because that was in his interest. Because if people voted no on the strike, they wouldn't get a good contract, and maybe he could get the union back. And so a couple of staff loyal to Rutledge didn't care how bad it was for workers. They stayed loyal to Rutledge. But the best organizers did care, and they broke from Rutledge and said, "No, I'm for the workers. I'm here for the workers."
Loyalty to the workers, not loyalty to you.
Yeah. And that was personally very hard for people. I mean, lifelong friendships were destroyed because people chose the workers over the person.
Right.
But to take the front of the house, so we had a guy, Mike McGurn, who was a foreman. He was a he was a foreman in the engineering department, local Hawaiian guy. And he started out thinking that as Filipino women, they just they'll do whatever the boss says. They're so weak, And we would have committee meetings for the hotel, and we had several a day because no one time would work. And his shift was 8 to 4. And the housekeeper's shift was either 7:30, 3:30, or 8 to 4. So we spent about a year coming to committee meetings whenever we had them, once a week, once a month, however often they were, and sitting there being one of the only local people in the room with Filipino women. And at the end of the year, he was like, "I used to think these women were weak. They are not weak." And so he had developed a real respect and ability to work together and make decisions about the priorities for the whole union together with those workers that allowed them to confront the boss and win. So that's how we got over you just got to build a committee.
Yeah.
That's all it is. Build the committee.
That's when you have a union.
That's also when you don't have a union.
Yeah.
That's how workers win, is building committees.
Well, I mean, you say you come to Boston, the beginning was hard for you too.
Yes.
Is okay to talk about that?
I'll probably be careful how I talk about it, but it's okay.
Right.
Yeah. What do you want to know?
Well, how do you overcome it?
Oh, you're going to be surprised at the answer. I built a committee. I'm serious.
Yeah.
A friend of mine, not just a friend, a mentor of mine in the union, talked about when she first. So Las Vegas is a very big city for us because we have. When the mob ran the city, it was okay. We could exist. If we tried to organize the dealers, they would kill us, literally. But otherwise, it was okay. But in the early 80s, the mob got run out of town by corporate America, and the corporations were like, "You're not okay." Right. So they nearly destroyed us in our 87 strike. And anyway, we've managed to figure our way into keeping Las Vegas a union town, even with the corporations. I don't think I'd ever heard one person who worked in Las Vegas not say that it was better when the mob ran than when the corporations ran it. But she talked about getting assigned to Vegas, which has between 50 and 70,000 members, depending on the year. And coming in, and she had a lot of experience under her belt, and she got put in a desk in the corner of the office and treated like she knew nothing. And so she's like, "So what I did, Laura, is I built the committee." And so she just built an organization. It's sort of like in Hawaii. You stay focused on a program with the boss, and you build an organization that can fight the boss. And then as time went on, her desk may have stayed where it was, but the center of focus of activity shifted to where she was because that's where the workers were.
Right.
And so that's pretty similar to how I handled coming into Boston, where there was talented. It was not Vancouver where I went, Hawaii where I went. There was real crises. And so the leadership, while it may have been an adjustment for them, they were happy to have me because they were in crisis. Boston was not in crisis. And it's harder to go to places not in crisis because I'm coming in saying, "I think we need to change things." And they're saying, "Well, who the fuck are you? We're doing pretty good. Thank you very much. No, we're not interested in hearing about Hawaii. We got this." Right. And so it can be hard, especially by that point I was 48. I'd been working for the union for 25 years. So, I wasn't exactly unopinionated, right? So it can just be hard for an organization that's not in crisis. Like if you're in crisis, you're like, "Great, there's fire over there. Can you put? Oh, good, you put the fire out. That's great. Okay, right? Like there's less organizational resistance. When the organization is functional but could be better, it's harder. Just because,
So you have to make more reform, but it's not.
The history of this local. So Hawaii had this huge sort of internal internal total
Upheaval.
reordering.
Yeah.
Boston also had one of those, but Boston's was in 1982.
Oh.
Hawaii's was in 2000.
Mhm.
And so, and I got there in 2002, so everything was still in total chaos and upheaval.
Mhm.
You know, Boston from 1982, it had a big upheaval, very interesting history that I think is tied into the history of busing. It's a very interesting moment in this local. But then from 82 was this guy named Bizzotto. From Bizzotto to Janice Locks, from Janice Locks to Brian Lang, from Brian Lang to Carlos Aramayo. It's been a series of each one is better than the last.
Mm-hmm.
But there is no upheaval in the organization and structure of the local.
Mm-hmm.
So it's different.
Okay. Now maybe go back to your early.
So Waterbury, Sheridan, those workers tried from 1990 to 1998 to win a union contract.
Mm-hmm.
When they first organized the union, the employer, they chose a sort of scorch the earth strategy, like break all the laws, just completely destroy any leadership that wants to fight the employer.
Like how do you do that? How did they do that?
So they, well, here, I'll tell you the story that's even earlier, that's shorter. Holiday Inn at the Crossings was a hotel by the airport in Rhode Island.
Mm-hmm.
Right before I got hired, the leader had a meeting that was supposed to be a secret meeting with a group of 13 people who wanted the union. There is no secret meeting if you have 13 people. Just, this is one of the things we learned. You can't have secret meetings with 13 people.
Right.
The next day, every single person got laid off or fired. We had banquet servers in the middle of serving a banquet, like literally trays in hand, grabbed by the boss and told, you're being laid off for lack of work. And that was it. Like the drive, nothing ever happened. And we won, and those people all got offered the jobs back or back pay, whatever, 2 years later, however long it took, but the drive was dead. Mm-hmm. So that's the most common way that an employer is going to try and defeat the union is the workers come forward, they say there's an issue. Well, they only do two things. They either beat you or they buy you. So, you know, there's a general manager at one of the hotels in Boston now who's been around for a long time. He has definitely adopted the attitude that the way to beat the union is to just buy them off. So if we come at him with 150 angry workers, he goes, oh, these are very serious concerns. I want to talk with you about them. And then the next day or the day after, he'll meet with you and he'll undercut all of his managers who said no, and he'll give you a nickel or a dime. Mm-hmm. And the worker's like, oh, he's so good. Mm. So there's the co-opting of people, or there's the terrorizing people. Right. So
carrot or stick. Yeah,
it's a carrot or the stick. And the Waterbury Sheridan was a big fan of the stick. And so from the first organizing drive through the second election, through the negotiations, through the sale of the property, they always chose we're gonna fire people for wanting the union. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, the stories are very detailed and technical about how did they do that, but that was just always their choice. And we kept fighting. We had the workers. We had a legal campaign. We tried to have a community and political campaign. We didn't have the politics in that town because it's an interesting town. And so we won, but what it resulted in is the closure of the hotel. And it's never reopened. That was 1998 or 99.
Detail about how the boss fight the union. I mean, I find interesting.
I'm happy to tell it. I just during the initial organizing drive, they shut down the restaurant because the restaurant was very supportive of the union. So all those workers lost their jobs. They hired security guards to go walk throughout the hotel before the election. And if they saw two workers talking to each other, to break it up and tell people to go back to work. Mm-hmm. We had a committee person whose assignment was to be on the floors. Mm-hmm. A house person who would bring stuff to different room attendants. They pulled that person, they changed their assignment, so they were taken off the floors and put into the laundry where they were isolated and couldn't speak to anybody. So they just, anything they could do to disrupt the normal organization. Mm-hmm. They held a mandatory meeting for workers where they had a worker come in. The organizer came to my house last night and threatened to firebomb my house and kill my children if I didn't vote for the union. So it was all a lie. It was all made. It was all fake. But so it was just a campaign of terror. We lost the election. We filed charges. The workers in housekeeping and the other departments who had not been fired, because the restaurant workers had been laid off. After we lost the election, they fired every single committee person, except for the one person who was out on maternity leave, because I think they were worried about firing somebody for being pregnant. Or maybe because they didn't know. Maybe because she wasn't in the hotel, maybe they thought she didn't really lead anybody. We took it to court. We won every piece of every case. It took 5 years, from 1990 to 1995, or maybe 4 years. Anyway, it took a long time. We had a second election, which we won again, because the boss was just that awful that even though people knew they were probably going to get fired, they did it again anyway. We spent a year or two struggling to get to a union contract, because in the U.S., winning a union doesn't mean you get to change your life. It just means you get the right to fight in a different protected legal position to change your life. Fought for a couple of years to get a contract, never got a contract. Then the owner sold. Then the new owner came in and said because if they hired a majority of people, then they would have to keep the union recognition. We would be able to keep fighting for that contract for another 9 years or something. They said, we're not going to hire based on experience. We're going to hire based on personality. So they hired based on personality. Surprisingly, only 45% of the current workers had a personality that was suited to the hospitality industry. The other 55% apparently were in the wrong job. So we got 4 college kids from Yale to also apply. Secretly. The boss didn't know they were with us. And the boss said a couple things in the interview process that were helpful, but we didn't have a really good case. So those 4 got hired, and they were good. They were good. Like, they wanted to do the right thing for the union, so they worked. I was like, it'd be great if you take the job and tell us what's happening. So they took the job. They're like 4 weeks in, or maybe it was months. But they were like, Laura, we live 40 minutes. We don't want to be like, we need to stop working. And I was like, but we hadn't figured out how to put the campaign back together. So what we really needed was legal proof that the employer didn't like the union, because their legal position was, we have no problem with union. We just hired on personality, and 55% of those workers did not have a good personality. And it's crazy. We all know it's a lie, but you can't prove it. So we needed to prove they didn't like the union. So the 4 college kids put on union buttons, and I prepared, which they have the legal right to do. If you could work at Starbucks or Amazon or the coffee shop down the street and wear a union button, they're not supposed to be able to fire you. And so they put their union buttons on, and literally the day they put them on, they were all fired. And they were like, it was trauma. They were like, that was awful. I was like, but you didn't want to work there. Anyway, so that gave us the evidence we needed to prove that they were anti-union, which made the rest of the case come together. So eventually we won an order from the court that said everybody should have been hired, that the whole thing was a ruse to avoid the union. Everybody should have been hired, and the employer owed back pay to all those people who didn't work for those 2 years. And at that point, the owner, gave the keys back to the lender and walked away. It was done, closed.
Never paid back.
No, I can't remember. I think it was bankruptcy. So workers come like last in bankruptcy, but I feel like I think we got some money. But they never got their job. Like they never got what they wanted, which is to work in that hotel, but just have a little bit better conditions. I mean, unions are not radical in the United States. They were not asking for very much, but I mean that place was. We were trying to. You mostly, if you're going to win in unions here, you need to have the workers, but you also need to have other outside pressure, either something else about the corporation or some political pressure. So in our quest for political pressure, I don't even remember the story, but the person who was mayor of Waterbury at the time, I think we caught him doing some illegal campaign contributions, and we were trying to get him to work with us, and he wouldn't work with us, and so we're like, all right, we're gonna file this thing with whatever we filed, campaign finance, whatever. We filed it. He got sent to jail. The next lawyer, the 5 years later, we're trying to work with the lawyer. This one we did not do, but then that mayor turns out to have been engaging in sex, not just with a prostitute, but paying a woman to bring her 15-year-old daughter to his office so he could have sex in his office of the mayor. Anyway, he also went, but that one we didn't bring him down. But I mean, that was the type of town it was. It was very hard to get any support outside this whatever strength the workers and the federal labor laws could bring.
Right.
And it's just very hard to win if you don't have that. In our industry, every industry is different. Hotels, casinos, you need the state approval for something or the other, always.